Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back again for another episode of the award-winning. How about that? Creativity and Compliance, new moniker. And of course, as always, joined by Ronnie Feldman. Today, we're absolutely thrilled to have with us Tyson Avery. So, Ronnie, I'm going to pitch it over to you to introduce Tyson and take us down the road.
Well, great. This is really exciting for me. The people who follow this podcast are probably tired of hearing me talk all the time about all these creative approaches. So we love bringing on guests who also share our passion for creativity, can share more additional practical applications for how you can apply these creative approaches into the workplace to make your jobs and lives better. Tyson Avery is the former Chief Ethics Compliance Officer at Starbucks, also previously at CBRE, and he's now Deputy General Counsel Compliance Officer
Yep.
for Lucid Motors. Well,
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
yes. So in our pre-chat, Tyson was reminding me that we've known each other since the CBRE days, and we share this passion for like whatever it is that you're doing in terms of training, communication, or engaging people one-on-one should have some creativity to it because it makes your life better. It makes their lives better. It makes these very scary, serious topics more accessible to people. And we were chatting the other day and there was some really fun and interesting ideas that you were sharing. So I want to talk about some of those. But first, tell me just a little bit about what does creativity mean to you in terms of how you engage people around ethics and compliance?
Yeah, thank you, Ronnie. Well, I thank you and Tom as well. I just want to emphasize something that you said is that these topics can be scary. And sometimes in our positions, we can walk in a room and everybody stiffens up and it's like, oh my gosh, why is that person here? What's going on? Something went wrong. And so unfortunately, all of us struggle with that. And what we want to do is change the dialogue to doing the right thing. And I sincerely believe that an effective ethics and compliance or compliance program starts with the corporate values, starts with a general understanding of doing the right thing. And that doing the right thing can be relatable. If you can relate it to other things in life or topics that you can align on, then the topics become more interesting. Why? Because antitrust is scary. Anti-corruption is scary. No one wants to have to deal with harassment and discrimination. But if you can bring in outside topics that are relatable and use those as hooks, then the message themselves has a tendency to resonate greater with the population and sticks with the organization. And why do we want it to stick? Because a couple things. We want to prop up our corporate values so they are truly part of the culture. But another thing too is we want our employees to feel empowered and comfortable to act, whether to engage on doing the right thing with our policies, or if they see something that's problematic, that they feel confident and comfortable to come forward. And so those behaviors matter. Those behaviors matter in a company's success and ability to mitigate misconduct. And so making it relatable is so valuable. My analogy to that is we all remember the Woodstock and the Peanuts from the 80s, where Charlie Brown's teacher would always just go walk, 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 walk. Nobody paid attention, right? And if you don't make what we do interesting and relatable, it's gonna sound like the Peanuts teacher, and it's not going to resonate with your population. So that is I believe that's a real critical element of efficacy in what we do.
Yeah, well, so to yes and that, Tyson, like one of the things that I keep reminding myself is that like everybody thinks they have integrity, right? Like, and then you talk about values and they're squishy and they feel meaningless or they feel inauthentic because they're, who doesn't say, oh, well, yeah, I have integrity. So the thing that you said about making it relatable is so crucial. Most companies, they'll maybe share case studies, like they'll kind of wash a case study and share, and it's very sterile about something that went wrong and it feels unrelatable. But these stories are interesting. Like these stories are
Yes.
really interesting, particularly things that happen in your company. And I know there's some legal ramifications about how you do that. So the more we can either relate it to something that happened in the news, something that happened in your company, something that happened with your kids or your family at home, any of those things I think are critical And then you have to go that extra layer to say like, all right, how can I make this relatable? And so I don't know if you want to have anything to add on to that, but I agree totally.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of summarizing it. Nobody comes into a company thinking, I'm going to violate the law and get fired in 2 years. You know, things have a tendency to start small and they build and they build. Rarely is there some sort of material violation that just happens overnight or immediately. So that's where culture really, really aligns. And if you were to ask somebody, hey, are you ethical? I would absolutely be shocked if you asked 100 people that question and one person said no. But we all believe that. But culture can have an amazing sway on our behaviors. Outside pressures can, inside pressures. There's all sorts of elements that can chip away at what we think is doing the right thing. So, Ronnie, to your point, hey, why do I have to listen to this? I am an ethical person. Well, actually, we are all subject to the same influences. And so having values and doing the right thing, part of the culture, the corporate dialogue and communication is valuable to keeping people on the right path. It really is.
So before I tip to you, Tom, I want to get into the specific project that you told me about a couple of years back. I thought it was such a fun idea about, well, let's just talk about it first, and I'll tell you what I like about it. But maybe share a little bit about the Wally Awards, or how that came about, and then we can kind of break down what was cool and interesting about it.
Yes, and for those compliance or ethics and compliance officers that are listening, you all know that the one thing that you really want to do is communicate the misconduct that's happened in the organization. And then your communications team gets involved and goes, no, don't do it. Because everyone's afraid, right? Everyone's afraid that your litigation team's worried that it's going to create potential litigation risk. We're worried about reputational risk, all that kind of stuff. And so I just want to start by saying you have to really work hard to build a team that's going to be comfortable with some of this stuff. And in one particular company that I worked in, and all cultures are different, but one was really interested in highlighting our misconduct, and in a way that, again, made it okay to come forward and highlighted that, yes, bad things do happen in big companies. And so we ideated on that. We tried to get creative. And what we ended up doing is we made it a game. And our communications were the most read communications in the company, which other departments hated, because we did make it interesting, but we created something called the Wally Awards. And so what we did is we created, the concept was that, kind of like evolution, is that over time, a species gets stronger by its weakest links leaving the genetic chain, so to speak. And so we were thinking of Charles Darwin, but to call it the Darwin Award seemed really strange. Like, the Darwin Awards, hey, you've removed yourself from the company and you made yourself stronger. So what we did is, if you go into history, he had a competitor named Alfred Wallace, who was under the same kind of evolutionary theories, but Darwin got his paper published before Wallace did. So we created the Wally Awards for Alfred Wallace, and it was designed where we were thankful for those that created significant misconduct and they removed themselves from the company to make the company stronger. And so what we did is we anonymized it. But the misconduct was still there, and we would pick our 5 most material, dramatic, or interesting misconducts of the year. We'd anonymize them so it was not attributable to anybody. We even changed the location so nobody could really understand where it was coming from, but the fact scenarios were true. And then we had our employees voluntarily vote on their favorite misconduct. And so the Wally Award was was one of the capstones of the year. And at the time, we had an employee base of about 30,000 employees. And this was totally voluntary. And we would get about 5,000 employees to vote, and people waited for it and asked when it was coming. And so what that did was a couple things. Number one, it normalized that things do happen in companies, no matter how big, no matter how fancy, no matter whatever the circumstances are, the human element is there. Number two, it made people comfortable to come forward, that this is part of my responsibility and I can come forward. And number three, it showed that we actually acted when something happened. It wasn't like we're going to make a report and it's going to go into a black box and it's never going to see the light of day. We acted when there were concerns. And so it built that trust in that really, really critical element of an effective ethics compliance program, which is the investigations and the remediation. And so we were very, very proud of it. It was, like I said, it was the highest read and engaged communication of the company, and it really made a difference. And we would get a significant increase in reports immediately after the Wally Awards came out. Again, because we encouraged that the misconduct was always there, but we encouraged people to come forward and feel comfortable and having, quite frankly, the bravery to say something's wrong.
It's brilliant on a bunch of levels. Like it basically took, like I said, all these companies compliance officers want to do these things. They want to unearth these things. But the framing of it is crucial, like by framing it up in this Darwinian principle, which is so awesome because, people don't like to tattletale and all that. There's this whole reframing we have to do about the whole idea of speaking up and what its purpose is. And its purpose is to make the organization stronger. So, your poor colleagues that are having problems, you want to solve that for them. So I love the reframing of it, which allows for all the things that you said, like allows you to share investigations, share that something actually happened to it, and that everyone's a part of making it better. Tom, let me check
Sure.
with you. What are some of your thoughts?
So I guess, Tyson, the thing that struck me was, in addition to talking about having an engaged audience listening or watching, you had engagement throughout the entire process. And you didn't have just buy-in. You had people nominating, you had people voting, you had people waiting, and that you created this entire ecostructure of engagement around compliance before we even got to the naming of the awards. And that you created this conversation, you created this buzz. And, Ryan and I often talk about engaged communications and making it fun and making it interesting for people. But it strikes me as maybe 20% of what Ronnie and I talk about is what you did, because the prep work you did to get to the point where you named the Wally Award seems to me to be, if not more important, at least as important, because you had people really thinking about compliance. And when you start thinking about it in that way, it's moving to the DNA of your company. So I was wondering if you could say a few words about really the pre-release part of the pre-announcement of the winners part, or really how you were able to use all of that, because I'm not sure we really talk about that enough.
Well, first of all, you have to have a general counsel who's committed to this. That's absolutely key. Anything that you try to do that is, for lack of a better word, out there, that really tries to stretch what we consider normal corporate communications or trends, you really need to make sure that the general counsel is comfortable. Then it's a matter of going on a charm campaign, saying, hey, here's what we want to do, and here's why we think this matters. Here's why we think this is good. And you always caveat it by saying, hey, we don't know. This could be a complete flop, or this could be a huge hit. And we were very, very fortunate that. But it also spoke to just the strength of our senior leadership team and their bravery, for lack of a better word, of saying, hey, you know what? We're not going to hide our eyes. No company, no matter how amazing the reputation is, it's still filled with people. And we need to bolster our reputation by saying, hey, look, when stuff happens, we run to the fire. There are fires in every organization. And so that really requires leadership awareness and leadership approval. And not every company is going to be comfortable with that. I do some things in my current space where I've included humor in my communications and those sorts of things, and that has really resonated well. But every company and every culture has their certain level of comfort, and you just have to find that. And in one particular one, I was really able to go all out, and it was really effective. But it may not be in other places. So finding what works for you is key.
Let me ask you a follow-up question to that, Tyson. I'm a big believer that, the common thing that I hear is like, oh, this is great, but we're really conservative. And the thing that it drives me crazy about that's sort of saying like, I'm cool, but we're not. But I guarantee that everybody feels that way at some extent. So it's not about, it's about reframing it. So what you're doing is it's a better solution for doing it in a boring way. So the creative approach is part of solving a problem. So I think the more that we reframe it around like, we really want our transparency and trust, We want to get more people involved. I have a creative way to do that versus like, let's do some games. It has to be framed within solving a problem. So with that is a long-winded backdrop of a question. Is there something particular that you did or that you do to sell in for those that have blockers or naysayers or people who might have that knee-jerk reaction? Any advice for those folks?
I would, yeah. So there is some buy-in that you need to have, and there are some folks that you need to make sure is comfortable. Like I said, general counsel is your first place to go. Communications is second. HR, I think, is third. And make sure that those entities are aware and comfortable. And then you really start small. You don't go all in on a Wally Awards on day one. You start to use, or at least I have on our communications, I've used circumstances in the news or certain cultural references that everybody knows. Those kinds of things to normalize your compliance communications about important things. So, I mean, I've used everything from lyrics in Taylor Swift songs as my hooks to, Darth Vader and Star Wars. I mean, however you can get people to align and recognize and connect with a hook helps them continue to read because they want to know what else you're going to say about Luke Skywalker. And that resonates. And again, what we want to do as ethics and compliance, we don't want to make, our intent is not to make someone an expert in sanctions, for example, or anti-corruption, for example. What we want them to have is issue identification. And so if they can walk away from any communication or any training with 1 or 2 data points, that's a win. So that's what I go with.
That's cool. We're getting towards the end of our time, but one thing you had said that I think I might even ask the question the wrong way, but you did monthly communications at your compliance corner, which I like. And so this, you're starting small, resonates with me about like, all right, let's find a way to get monthly touch points in some creative way that helps them identify issues. Do you maybe want to just do a quick touch point about some of the ways you did your compliance corner to help them with sort of their small start before they're ready for a Wally Awards?
Yeah, I would just again say it small. Find something that aligns with your discussions, even if it's something that is public knowledge of a violation. You can start that way. I mean, for example, Walmart's huge FCPA violation in Mexico was something that I think all compliance officers could use as a hook. Walmart, this big, amazing brand with all of this infrastructure, even they had a massive fall from grace. So you can start with those kinds of things and then kind of build your way into other things and just see how far you can take that in a way that resonates with your culture, in a way that employees remember. And you'll recognize it. The way that I knew I was onto something is I would be in an office somewhere remotely and they're like, "You're Tyson Avery? Hey, you're the guy that," they may not have remembered the communication, but they remembered the hook, and which meant they read the whole thing. So yeah, I'm a big believer that communication should be continuous because ethics, values, our deportment should be a continuous thing. So if you make it that repetitive issue identification type of repetition, that is really key.
Tom, any final thoughts? I have a couple before we wrap up. What do you?
Yeah, Tyson, I want to see if I can summarize what I think I just heard of 3 key points. Number 1, general counsel and senior executive management buy-in. Number 2, come up with a hook. And number 3, follow up with continuous communications. Would those be sort of a 3-point assessment that we could take home from this podcast?
I think that's really good because you've got tone at the top, who's committed. You've got issue identification. And then you make it continuous, so it's part of your culture and part of who you are. So yes, absolutely.
And I'll put a button on it, which is to me, the wrapping around all this is it has to be creative, interesting, playful, positive. Doesn't have to be funny, but there's so many ways that we consume information in our everyday lives that engage us. Let's use those same techniques in how we deliver this information. And to your point, Tyson, it doesn't only make the issue more welcoming and approachable, it makes you more welcoming and approachable, which is half the battle.
That's right. That's right. If I'm more relatable, I'm less scary when I walk into a room. And that's something that all compliance officers have to deal with. Everybody in legal for that matter.
Tyson, thank you so much for joining us. I've been wanting to talk to you about this I hope to be able to bring you on again for some of these other creative projects, but this is a nice starting point. Thanks for sharing your thoughts, ideas, and wisdom.
Wonderful. Thank you all. It was a pleasure to be on.
Thanks, Tyson.
Take care.